Hello and welcome to the third and final part of my How to BF-109 G-14 video series. In this video I will talk about how to fight in the BF-109 and how to fight the specific enemies you usually meet when you fly the BF-109 G-14. Let's get going. In part 1 we established that the BF-109 G-14 is a fast climbing, maneuverable fighter aircraft which is able to outclimb its adversaries in most situations, and that is what you will be generally exploiting as a seasoned 109 pilot. You will attack enemies from a superior altitude, dive in, fire a short but devastating burst and then climb up again with full power. While cruising around and looking for trouble, you keep high situational awareness. Especially when you see an enemy down low, you need to check if guys are on your current altitude to avoid nasty surprises. Between attacks you need time to build up SA again to compensate for the relative bad visibility to the rear. You want to check low 6 and the sky all around you when climbing up again. When danger is imminent, use your level speed and or the superior climb rate to get out of trouble. Vary the climb angle depending on the aircraft you meet. Steeper angles work especially good against heavy but fast opponents like the 51 Tempest, and more shallow angles work very well against better climbing aircraft like the 38 and the Spitfire. Always think about the current setting of your stabilizer trim. Do you plan to attack in a high speed and high deflection shot? You better pick a tail heavy trim to manage that turn in the end of that dive. Do you need to run someone down or do you need to run away? Trim the plane nose heavy to achieve the aircraft's top speed. So that is the general outline. Stay fast, stay above the fights, swoop in, attack stuff, swoop out and reassess. The G-14 can maneuver with most enemies but only by a relatively small margin. The G-14 is also slower than many enemies, so escaping maneuvering fights is quite difficult. That's why you should avoid them. The G-14 is a plane which can fight very nicely in the defense, however, because at maneuvering speeds the aircraft rolls nicely and is able to turn very tightly. But make sure you don't run out of speed, since let's say below 250 km per hour the aircraft is very sluggish in a horizontal turn fight. Wing overs, stall fights are fine, however. The G-14 is also, comparatively speaking, very light, so it has a very good acceleration. I don't have many tips on the gunnery part in the G-14. I personally avoid the gun pods and fly most of the time with the Mk108. I use 400 meters as my convergence. I explain my reasoning for this very detailed in my dedicated convergence video, which I link in the description and on screen right now. If you have any questions about that topic, this video should answer it. Overall, I like the armament of the BF-109 and the gun placement. I can fully understand why the Germans and the Russians preferred centerline armament. It makes everything easier. 13 and 20 and 30mm are very powerful rounds and cripple enemy fighters very quickly. They have all plenty of high explosive filler and cause serious damage to surface and the structure of the aircraft. When you equip the Mk108, it makes sense to fire the cannon and the MG separately to save ammunition. You want to discharge the cannon when you have a good chance that you actually hit the target with the 30mm. Against fighters the 30mm is great too. The 30mm blows up the aircraft surface very quickly and deals quite amount of damage. Generally speaking, the G-14 is a lot faster than the Spitfire Mark 9. At least 20 kph on the deck, and this advantage remains true until an altitude of 7,000 meters, and that is really noticeable. So outpacing is the main way to get rid of a Spitfire, and catching them isn't hard either. There's a mod available for the Spitfire which allows the installation of a high altitude engine. The M70 makes the Spitfire even faster at higher altitudes but slower at lower altitudes. So the general outline how to fight the Spitfires remain the same. Since you have usually excess of speed, you can use that to climb away in a shallow angle at like 450 km per hour. Climbing away in a steep angle is not advised since Spitfires can roughly match your climb rate. The Spitfire is also way more maneuverable than the G-14 and has no problems turning into the 109 and creating gun solutions quickly. The roll rate of the Spitfire is generally speaking a bit lower than the 109's roll rate, however many pilots, including me, pick the clipped wing version and that one rolls much quicker and can match the direction changes of the 109 with relative ease. The acceleration of the two aircraft are somewhat comparable, so in a drag race you usually don't extend away. So all this was true for the 130 octane Spitfire. However, there is another version of the Spitfire around, the 150 octane Spitfire, and this makes quite a difference. The 150 octane version of the Spitfire is now almost as fast as the G-14, not quite, but the difference is really narrow. The main gains of the higher quality fuel is in acceleration and in climb rate, and the Spitfire benefits a lot from the better fuel. It now climbs and accelerates much better than the G-14 and really eats the older 109 models for breakfast. General tips to fight Spitfires are: stay fast, stay at higher energy, avoid vertical attacks in quick succession, since the Spitfire can equalize energy states quite quickly and can hold the nose up for a long time, can prop hang after you for a long time. When the Spitfire is at equal or same energy, avoid a fight by running away in straight lines and exploit your speed. That can be used to set up drag and back tactics with a wingman or to run to safe spaces and to the reset. It's not that you can't fight Spitfires in maneuvering fights, but it's extremely difficult. Ideally you jump them, you don't stick with them, ideally use team tactics. Fighting a Spitfire one-on-one is difficult, so you better use those surprise tactics. Trying to get some hits even when the solution is not the best, since Spitfires are quite fragile, especially the tail. A Spitfire enters an unrecoverable spin when one elevator is missing or is damaged. In the defense, try to fly away if you have some separation, if not, try to create it. Try to exploit the twitchy elevator by doing a lot of sudden direction changes. Flat scissors are good maneuvers against them. The ease with which the Gs are pulled in a Spitfire tire the pilot quite quickly. The 109's elevator is much easier to control and the reclined seat gives some advantage to the 109 pilot. Pilot exhaustion is something a Spitfire pilot really has to fight. But don't get me wrong, having Spitfires behind you in such a situation is a big mess. Sometimes in those close quarter fights an escape window opens up, like the Spitfire makes the wrong move and turns the wrong way and needs some time to catch up again. Use those moments to race away as quickly as possible to avoid those hairy knife fights. The Spitfire is also a bit worse in high-speed aerodynamics, so this means in turn that you can outdive them for a while. In the initial dive they roughly dive equally good, but then as the speed increases the gap opens and as soon as you hit the deck you are either faster than the 130 octane version or you have equal speed than the 150 octane version and you can keep that distance for a while. Another fact which might help you a little bit is a limited war emergency power in Spitfires. It's only lasting for 5 minutes and the G-14 has a 10-minute timer on full power and that timer recovers much more quickly than the Spitfires. So Spit pilots have to fiddle around with the engine, especially since they control the RPMs and the throttle separately. They constantly have to nurse the engine to save some time on the engine. The Tempest, quite a beast of an aircraft, and let's talk first about the 9-pound version of the Tempest. And the G-14 is much slower over all altitudes compared to that model. That is the main disadvantage of the 1.9 in a fight against the Tempest. The Messerschmitt is, however, the better climbing aircraft, which is the main advantage over the Tempest. That said, overall the 109 is the less maneuverable aircraft of both, especially at high to medium speed. Somewhat on par at lower speed. However, since the Tempest is quite heavy, the aircraft loses quite some energy in a flat turn. The wing design of the Tempest is just not good at lower speed, resulting that acceleration and climb rate is also not very good. But similarly to the Spitfire, there's another more powerful version of the Tempest, and that is the 11-pound version. And it's basically just increasing the magnitude of the speed advantage the Tempest already has over the G-14. The G-14 gets catched in a straight line fight or in a dive very, very quickly, and the Tempest is very easy to handle in a turn, in a dive, so you better don't dive away from Tempests. But now for the tips. The Tempest is, like you maybe noticed, quite a beast, and only can reliably be defeated by having a clear advantage at the beginning of the fight, or if you can create that advantage over the course of the fight, which is difficult. The Tempest is just incredibly fast. The guns are very deadly and still turns very, very well. So in case you meet a Tempest on equal energy in a head-on-ish pass, you can try to climb up first in a shallow angle to get separation, and if the Tempest turns around aggressively, the chances are high that you end up in a slight energy advantage. You can then increase that advantage further by out-climbing the Tempest with a more aggressive climb angle. However, this does not work when you are still in gun range and on equal energy. One Hispano hit deals a significant amount of damage, and the Tempest features 4 Hispano cannons, so you better bring a friend against the Tempest or avoid a fight at equal energy. When everything failed, you can defeat the attacks from Tempest similarly to Spitfires, with jigs and flat scissors. Since the 109's roll rate at medium speeds is good and the Tempest struggles to get rid of speed, the Tempest is heavy and wants to continue to go into that direction it's already going. Physics, you know? So energy traps work quite well when the pilot of the Tempest is somewhat inexperienced, but when he manages to throttle quite well, there's not much you can do. Another possibility to get away from Tempests is to exploit their bad acceleration. For example, in a situation where you climb away but you are on equal climb speed, 270 km per hour roughly, you can just level out, and from there it's solely a competition of acceleration. This is an easy way to get some distance between you and a Tempest. Similarly to the Spitfire, the pilot of the Tempest is tiring a bit faster for the same reasons. The elevator of the Tempest is quite effective and the seat is not reclined. The engine limits of the Tempest can't be really exploited, since even at lower engine regimes the aircraft has still enough power to catch a G-14 easily. So in conclusion, jump them, avoid a fight, bring friends. The P-51. And let's talk first about the 130 octane version. The G-14 is about 30 kph slower on the deck, and it gets only worse the higher you go. The 51 has a fantastic supercharger. However, the 51 is subpar in a climb and accelerates slower than the aircraft is quite heavy, and the design is not really that great for lower speeds. However, surprisingly, the Mustang is not bad in a turn fight. The BF-109 and the Mustang are roughly equal in a flat turn, but the 109 has the cards as soon as the fight includes more vertical aspects. Another weakness of the 51 is the roll rate at medium and low speeds, and the Mustang likes to stall in high angle of attack maneuvering, especially when at the bottom of a loop or in a tight turn. One major advantage of the Mustang is the G-suit of the American pilot, which adds roughly 1 G to the total G tolerance and lets the US pilot tire less quickly. The 150 octane version is even faster than the 130 octane version. The rest of the statistics relative to the G-14 stay the same, so the climb rate doesn't get better, and the acceleration still is a bit worse than the G-14's acceleration. So in the end, not very surprisingly, fighting the 51 is somewhat similar to fighting Tempest, since both allied fighters have similar strength. You attack 51s ideally in slashing attacks, and climbing away is also a good idea when enough separation can be guaranteed. From there on, the G-14 can dictate this fight from an energy advantage. Any straight line racing contest should be avoided. The 51 has all the cards in that contest. Should you be bounced by a 51, you have different options, and it's overall a bit easier to fight 51s than Tempests. In the defense, rolling and flat scissors help a lot because the roll rate of the 109 and maneuvering speeds, roughly between 270 to 400 km per hour, is quite competitive, and the 51 pilot has to be really good to keep the Mustang under control in those maneuvers. Also, the very aerodynamic airframe of the 51 works against him in scissors where the aircraft decelerates not very quickly, so overshoots quite easily. Once slow, the wing design of the Mustang shows its deficits. Acceleration and bad low-speed aerodynamics make maneuvering quite difficult, but not impossible. Good pilots who know the limits of the 51 can achieve fantastic turn rates, but overall, low-speed fighting is not really a thing you want to do in a Mustang. A good 109 pilot can exploit that by forcing quick direction changes, like they happen in flat scissors, rolling scissors, or stall fights. Time the G-14 pilot can use to either shoot the Mustang down or to climb away or to out-accelerate the 51. If you get snapshots in the fight, you should try to hit the Mustang with a 13mm, because as soon as you hit them on the wings, the good aerodynamic properties go out of the window. Obviously, a damaged Mustang is much slower than the pristine one. The engine limits of the 51 are quite benign, so nothing to exploit here. Technically, we have two versions of the 47 in the game, the D22 and the D28. But the weight of the Thunderbolt has an immense impact on the aircraft's performance. The fuel, guns and ammo of the aircraft are quite heavy, and the gun configuration 4, 6 or 8 guns can be selected pre-flight. The carried ammo and fuel obviously varies heavily over the course of a sortie. A Thunderbolt with just 4 guns and a minimum amount of fuel and ammo is quite nimble and fast climbing, and a Thunderbolt with 8 50 cals and full fuel is not. For this video I compare the G-14 to Thunderbolts in some kind of standard configuration. 8 guns, no extra ammo and 500 liters of carried fuel. That's roughly half the amount I usually take off with. So have that in mind when fighting 47s, the aircraft's performance can vary drastically. The D22 is faster than the D28 because the D22 has a Razorback style canopy which is aerodynamically better. This leads to the fact that the G-14's top speed is not enough to catch a D22 at any altitude. The climb rate of the G-14 is way better on the deck, but depending on fuel state, the 47 starts to climb better at roughly 5,000 meters and higher. Similarly, this applies to the acceleration, much worse on the deck, but this gets better with altitude. The 47 is overall less maneuverable than the 109, especially at lower speed. The maneuverability is okay at medium and higher speed, but at lower speed the aircraft becomes quite sluggish. The flaps are highly effective and help with that fact, and a light 47 can stay with a flat turning G-14 for quite a while, but not when the G-14 includes rolls, scissors and uses some flaps. There's no way a 47 can follow a rolling G-14 at higher speeds. In extreme dives the 47 gets all shaky, is hard to control, but can still dive after the 109. The Thunderbolt is overall a well diving aircraft. It's not very pleasant to do as a pilot, because the aircraft locks up and, like I said, all shaky. The 150 octane version of the D22 makes the speed advantage even more clear and improves the climb rate quite a bit, by adding 5 inches to the maximum manifold pressure of the Thunderbolt. But the main advantage of the higher quality fuel can't be read off the stats. The previous max power setting of the 130 octane fuel can now be held for 15 minutes instead of the 5 minutes. And without water methanol injection. This makes the Thunderbolt much more competitive since the top speeds can be held much longer. The G-14 is now speed-wise completely outclassed. For example, the D22 gets 20 kph on top of the already quite good top speed on the deck. The G14 is really left in the dust here. The D28 on 130 octane is on the deck roughly as fast as the G14, making it the slowest 47 variant. But this Thunderbolt version is faster above 6 kilometers, thanks to the excellent turbocharger after all. The climb rates are similar to the D22, subpar at lower altitudes, but increasingly better the higher you go. The 150 octane version lifts the top speed to roughly the levels of the 130 octane D22. So the D28 at the high quality fuel is now quite a bit faster than the G14, and can hold those top speeds a bit longer as well. But now for the tips against 47s. The 47 is quite a weird opponent. I rarely meet 47s which engage my aircraft in a competitive way, mainly because pilots who want to shoot down planes are going to select fighters which are easier to handle, like the P-51 for example, or the Tempest. That said, on paper, the 47s are quite capable aircraft. As you heard, the climb rate is quite good, the top speeds are good, and this all sounds quite competitive, and as a matter of fact it is very good. However, most of this is only valid for the 5 or 15 minutes of all-out power in the 47, and more importantly, the 47 needs to be flown in the right engine settings all of the time, so the pilot of the 47 has to be up his game. That is something you rarely meet online. On top of that comes the atrocious acceleration of a Thunderbolt. The jug is good at maximum speed, but when the G14 needs to be catched in a drag race or in a shallow climb, the jug really needs its time to get there, or is just not able to. So when you meet a 47 at equal energy, a spiraling climb is a good way to exploit the heavy airframe of the Thunderbolt. Alternatively, the good old shallow climb helps too. Inform yourself which models the allies can field in the particular mission you are flying in, so you know which versions of the 47s are available. Out-accelerating, out-climbing or out-maneuvering are all good ideas depending on the situation. In general, you should keep your distance, again, like against all other aircraft, but against 47s you have plenty of options. Just keep a close eye on them, what they are doing, if they are really maneuvering around in a nimble way. If it looks good what they are doing, you probably need more careful tactics, but other than that, 47s generally speaking are no problem to defeat. The worst thing you can do is underestimating them. P-38s are slower up until an altitude of 6 km. Above that they are faster thanks to the turbocharged engines. The P-38 are well climbing aircraft, but not climbing as good as the G-14, at least up until an altitude of 7,000 meters. Above that, again, the Lightning starts to climb better. The acceleration is kind of similar, worse at low altitude, better at very high altitude. The thing is, most accelerations take place at low altitudes. For an aircraft of its size, it's a very maneuverable aircraft. It's not Spitfire level of maneuverability, however, enough to stay with the 109 long enough to deal deadly damage. The armament consists of 4 50 calibers and one 20mm cannon, all concentrated in the nose, and that in turn means that the aircraft has much less trouble firing at aircraft well beyond their usual effective ranges. The climb rate deficit can basically be negated by shooting from longer ranges. It's like one beam of deadly projectiles, very easy to aim. Proficient 38 pilots defeat the enemies. They hook the enemy in from longer ranges, forcing that the defender has to turn in, and from there on they defeat their prey by turning with them and defeating them in a maneuvering fight. When diving after 38s, you are in for a surprise. They are not only very slippy, they are quite nicely diving aircraft up until a certain point, but they are also rolling very nicely. The ailerons are horizontally boosted, meaning that the faster the 38 goes, the better the roll rate is. That is very surprising and throws off a lot of 109 pilots trying either to pursue a 38 and overshooting, or they're getting chased by a 38 and they want to avoid the guns by rolling, which is a very bad idea. That said, those situations are kinda rare. the most 38s you will meet in your online play are 38s which are flown in the ground attacker role. Defeating those is obviously not difficult, but when you meet 38 pilots who know their stuff, even when they're ground attacking, you are sometimes in for a surprise and you have to be careful. You have to attack with a speed overhead, so you clear the gun range of the 38 quickly. For a 109 pilot, the most dangerous situations develop when a 38 attacks with an energy surplus, often at very high altitude where the 38 has a speed and climb advantage. Some 109s with their superiority complex are hellbent to climb into lightnings, which is, spoiler alert, not a very good idea. Like I said, it's also not a good idea to dive away from 38s in a steep angle when the lightning is still very close. In the initial dive, the 38 can follow, and the guns have also the range to cross a large distance. And like I said, the 38 can follow evasions like rolls very nicely with the hydraulically boosted ailerons. So to sum it up, avoid maneuvering fight with the 38. So keep the fight around top speed and level, not too much climbing, and exploit the speed overhead the 109 has over the 38. Also, 38s are prone to drag and back tactics because all the struts and the boom in the background are basically hampering the visibility the pilot has to the rear and to the sides. But I think this is it for today. It really got long enough and longer than I thought. I could talk more about Soviet aircraft, how the 109 G-14 handles against the Yaks, which is very easy to be fair, and of course against the LA5FN. If you want to hear that, just let me know in the comments. I will make a small addition, basically another mini chapter to this, and I will talk a bit about the FN, but it's actually there are not many surprises here how to defeat those, but I keep that for another video, I guess. I talked long enough in this one here. If you want, take a look at my Patreon page. Those videos take time and effort to create, so if you want to support my cause here, then take a look at my Patreon channel, and if you want, leave a pledge. Other than that, have a nice day. See you soon.